Obviously, he's a PhD candidate at the School of Law and Social Justice at the University of Liverpool. He's a graduate of the University of Manchester and of UCL, where he completed Masters in International Property Law. Having chosen a change in direction as a result of his advocacy work and activism, he's currently researching the fairness and efficiency of the British asylum system from the perspective of individuals claiming asylum on grounds of their sexual orientation. He writes a blog called Rethinking the British Asylum System for LGBT Refugees. Welcome to Steve. Steve's right to my left is Hayam Iman. She's an asylum seeker from Morocco, where she obtained a diploma in management and her license to practice law. In her home country, she worked as a consultant in insurance law. She's fluent in Arabic, French, and is rapidly improving her English skills. I'm sure she's fluent in English. I'm sure she's fluent in English as well. Hayam has been living in the UK since March 2013. And last but by no means least is Eddie Friedman, who was born in Chicago. She's a student in the 1960s. She was heavily influenced by the civil rights and peace movements over there. She came to England to study in Leeds and subsequently worked in Oxfam and at the Community Relations Council in Ealing, West London. In 1976, she formed the Jewish Council for Racial Equality, of which she is now the Executive Director. In 2008, she co-authored Reluctant Refuge, the Story of Asylum in Britain. She's also authored and co-authored a series of race equality education resources covering the primary school to adult age ranges. She's a regular speaker and writer on these asylum issues. So welcome, Eddie. So we're going to kick off first with Angela. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
No.
Okay. Lovely. Can everyone hear me now? Yeah, good. Well, thank you very much. I'm really honoured to be here. Really fantastic organisation bringing you all together and I think to discuss this really important issue. So what I'm going to do, I apologise a little bit for the PowerPoint, but because I'm going to be talking about quite a few figures, I thought that it would be useful to actually have it so you can also see as well as listen to me. So I'm going to be talking about the global picture of asylum. And as has been said, a lot of myths and prejudice. So I'm going to be talking about some of the facts to dispel those myths. I'm going to talk about immigration detention and, importantly, refugees' contributions to the UK. I work for Freedom from Torture, and I'll talk about that organisation and survivors of torture. And the overarching theme, really, from where I'm coming, is the importance of human rights. And I'm going to start with a quote from a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but in very good company. And really to say that human rights is going to come out of the closet and the law court, and actually it's really important that we incorporate it and value them in our daily lives. So this is a quote from a young Somali refugee, and he says, "When you're a refugee, your life is never complete. There's always part of your life that's missing, and that part is home." So what I wanted to ask you today is, what proportion of the world's refugees come to the UK? Does anyone have any ideas?
20%? 1%.
Okay, we've got 50%, is that what you said? And we've got 1%. Any others?
11%.
11%, okay.
5%.
5, right, okay. I mean, actually, from the media, you would have thought that it is sort of over 50%. But, actually, I'm afraid I haven't got a prize, but if I did, the gentleman here would receive it, because UNHCR has basically, the UK is home to just over 1% of the world's refugees, so much, much lower than and certainly the media project. And, you know, as you can see, there's a wide variation in perception. And as an example, thinking about DRC Congo, so in 2012, a very small number of people, actually it was less than 1%, applied for asylum in the UK. So we've established that actually the world's poorest countries host the most refugees. Most people actually flee to the neighbouring country, which often is as poor and maybe as unstable as the country from which they've fled, and the majority of people are fleeing countries in conflict. I think what's also changed is the fact that in modern warfare, the vast majority of casualties are civilians. So people in their ordinary lives are very much affected by conflict. And UNICEF estimated that nearly 1 in 100 of the global population are war displaced, which is quite a staggering figure. So these are figures from the Refugee Council, and really giving the facts to dispel some of the myths. So the fact that often people are described as being bogus asylum seekers or illegal, I do not like that term used about any human being. But actually, it's not just that. The legal system, the Geneva Convention, says that everybody has the right to apply for asylum. So nobody is a bogus asylum seeker. Their case may not be accepted, but they have every right to apply for asylum. And as has already been said, these are some of the major countries from which people are coming to the UK, and all have a poor human rights records or ongoing conflict. We think about children. Now, in 2012, just over 1,000 children came, separated from their families. So that's a very, very risky situation for children to be in. And the reason that they and their families took that decision was that they were fleeing very serious conflict. Many came from Afghanistan, described as the world's most dangerous place to be a child. And what happens when they get to the UK? Again, contrary to what is often portrayed, the UK asylum system is very strictly controlled, very complex. And actually, asylum applications are actually reducing in recent years. The majority of applications are refused. And I don't know if anyone saw the article in this week's Guardian, where it's actually described how Home Office employees are actually given incentives to reach targets of refusing cases. And it's well demonstrated that those initial decisions are often flawed. And we've done work at Freedom from Torture actually describing that. And the courts on appeal have overturned almost a third of negative decisions, so poor decision making initially. And it actually, the system is quite heavily weighted against women. About 50% of negative decisions for women were overturned in 2011. So women fared even less well on the initial decision. And since 2005, if people are granted refugee status, the majority only can actually be guaranteed to stay here for 5 years. They're given permission to stay for just 5 years. It's not permanent. They can then reapply, but actually if you think about trying to rebuild your life when you don't know what's going to happen after 5 families, that's very hard. And the significance of immigration detention, where people are locked up in increasing numbers. And it's like being in prison, except that people have committed no crime, and they also have no idea how long they're going to be detained. And this is very detrimental for mental health, particularly if people have been previously detained or tortured. And reflecting that, there's a very high level of self-harm and suicide in detention centres. Children are not meant to be detained. This contravenes the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And prior to 2008, the UK actually had a reservation on asylum-seeking children. So this means that the UK had signed the convention saying we won't lock up children, but they had a reservation. They said, apart from asylum-seeking children. There was a long campaign to overturn this, and this reservation was actually removed in 2008. But as you can see from the figures, still a significant number of children, although it is declining, but still children are locked up in immigration detention centres in the UK. And almost all asylum seekers are forbidden to work, and actually the skills of asylum seekers, as we'll see, are very high, but people are not allowed to work. So they are forced to be dependent, even though they don't want to be. And the state support, as you can see, is very little. And if people have their claim refused, then they have no support at all, and many are forced into destitution, and particularly for women, but also anyone who's destitute and living on the street is very vulnerable to violence. So they fled violence, and they come to a country where they may experience violence again. And the contribution of all migrants to the UK is phenomenal. But even just focusing on refugees, which I will hear, I mean, it's documented that migrants pay more into the public purse compared to people born in the UK. And the job creation, and as I said, the skills of people, a significant number of people are medically qualified, also teachers, a whole number of skills. And people need support to actually be able to work and contribute as people want to do. And as you can see, not only the value for the individuals and for society, but economically it makes sense as well. So talking about freedom from torture, we're a voluntary organisation and we work throughout the UK. We have 5 centres. And torture has been described as the act of killing a person without their dying. And it's a very violent and a very significant attempt to destroy a person's physical and psychological integrity. It's estimated that between 5 and 30% of asylum seekers are torture survivors. There's quite a wide variation depending on the country where people are coming from. And the importance that we place on working holistically and physical and psychologically, but also practical help that we offer. And importantly, protection as well. So the legal aspect is very important. And a researcher, Eisenbrook, described the cultural bereavement that people who have been forced into migration experience, and there's a multiple loss. And the things that really give meaning to life, so our social structures, our family and friends, cultural values, the relationships, as well as the material losses. But the fact that people have lost their support structure and, as you can see, have come into what's often a very hostile situation. And these are people who may be very vulnerable, but also have a huge amount of resilience, which I will also talk about. So the work that we offer is therapeutic. So we do individual work, group work, and it's very much particularly wanting to break the isolation that people are feeling and providing safety. And as well as talking, there's also activities, and that may be actually doing something together with other people, which is the important support. People may not want to talk about their experiences, some people do, but we offer a very wide range of ways that people can find some security and some stability and be able to think about rebuilding their lives. And the importance of the legal aspect. So we also document evidence of torture and offer legal advice. And campaigning is a very important part of what we do. You'll find on the table at the back some examples of some recent reports that we've written, and focusing on specific countries, so Sri Lanka and Iran most recently, and also the impact of poverty on the capacity of survivors to actually rebuild their lives. If people are living in poverty, that has a real impact on their ability to actually rebuild. And I talked about the resilience of many of our clients, and these are two women who have been at freedom from torture, which I think really illustrates the resilience. And it's Ansar says, "You can break my body, but you'll not break my will." And Teresa said, "Help me to stand up, and I will go on fighting." So I'll end as I started, saying that I think taking a human rights perspective for the issue of asylum, of health, and of actually having a cohesive and a supportive society is really important. And to emphasise how migrants and asylum seekers and refugees enhance our communities. And this is just a list of the places where we're based in the UK, and our website at the bottom. Do take any of the literature, which you'll find at the back. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Lots of issues there that we'll pick up in our Q&A session. If you now move straight over to Steve to look at the issues around the fairness and efficiency of the British asylum system.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm really honoured to be here to speak alongside William as well as Angela, and you do represent two fantastic organisations. I want to start by painting the context in which the persecution of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people occurs, and therefore the context in which asylum is sought. So there are 7 countries worldwide that retain the death penalty for consensual same-sex sexual acts. Those are Iran, Mauritania, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, parts of Somalia, parts of Nigeria. On the 20th of December 2013, the Ugandan parliament just passed a bill that broadens the criminalization of same-sex sexual relations, which includes life imprisonment for aggravated homosexuality. It also punishes individuals, NGOs, media organizations, and companies who either know of LGBT people or support LGBT rights. In this case, it isn't LGBT people who are targeted. It is also your family, your friends, teachers, colleagues, or even your medical professionals. If they don't report the fact that they know you are gay or lesbian, and they are liable to be imprisoned for up to 7 years. Nigeria is a country that's already criminalized homosexuality and has done for a long time. But on Monday, the Nigerian president has signed a bill to criminalize same-sex marriage and makes it punishable by 14 years imprisonment to enter into one, and 10 years to even attend one. The same law also outlaws LGBT organizations, and by virtue of this, HIV organizations as well. Similarly, extreme legislation has been mooted in Liberia, in Burundi, in South Sudan. The Indian Supreme Court has just overturned the judgment of the Delhi High Court and has recriminalized homosexuality in India. Legislation criminalizing homosexual propaganda has been approved in Russia. The law makes it illegal to hold any sort of public demonstration in favor of gay rights, to speak in defense of gay rights, or to distribute material related to gay rights. This is but a snapshot of the treatment that LGBT people, including LGBT Muslims, receive around the world. But importantly, and most importantly, each piece of legislation that I have mentioned has resulted in an increase in attacks on LGBT people, even as we speak. So, my PhD research is focused on how LGBT people experience the British asylum system. So I want to share with you some common experiences of LGBT people. One, in fleeing actual and threat of violence from their countries of origin, and two, in accessing protection in the UK. In many ways, the persecution of LGBT people is different to how we understand the average refugee crisis, say in Iraq, in Darfur, in Afghanistan, in Syria, and I'll explain how. What is different about the persecution of LGBT people? We traditionally understand persecution as of state agencies persecuting a section of their citizenship. This is definitely the case in LGBT rights, as the criminal sanctions show. But also in this context, people probably suffer the most amount of violence from non-state agents. Those are families, neighbors, peers, classmates, and strangers. Why? Why is this the case? This is because non-state agents are gaining sanction and legitimacy from the criminal sanctions that exist. So, in essence, the existence of sanctions within a country legitimizes the conduct of people to behave and to persecute with impunity, because they know that if the state persecutes these people, they will be able to do so too. And they also know that not only will they not be punished, but also LGBT people cannot seek protection from the state and the state agencies. Although LGBT people are persecuted for their identity and seek protection on this basis, it is not because they're LGBT that they are persecuted. Even straight people can fall foul of the way that LGBT people are persecuted. It is not because these people are LGBT. It's because that they do not comply with the norms and conventions that are dictated by their society, and they are punished accordingly. So it's for this reason that in Jamaica, a woman who resists the advances of a man, or who chooses to live alone without a husband, she will often be labelled a lesbian and be subjected to a corrective rape. This is not about the truth of their identity, but it's because these people don't even have to be gay or lesbian to be identified as such. It is because of their punishment. It is punishment for their failure to conform. From this example, you may also have gathered that sexual violence is a huge, huge feature of LGBT persecutory narratives. Corrective rape speaks for itself. As are anxiety-based health problems such as post-traumatic stress disorder, personality disorder, other ones that Angela would know better than I do. This is not only caused by actual violence, it's also caused by the harmful impact of repressing your sexuality and living in constant fear of being outed and subjected to harm. So when I talk about the system, the first thing that I'd like to talk about is reception conditions. Angela's talked a bit about that in terms of detention, but I'd like to talk some more. For people fleeing violence from their countries of origin, Britain is meant to be a safe haven. But it's interesting that the reality is that the British asylum system serves to re-traumatize. So the asylum system is something that you have to endure, in essence, from any time up to, for a few weeks, 2 weeks, anything up to 7, 8 plus years. There is something that we know as the fast track and detention policy. So the fast track policy is where the system is sped up, where it's believed that a quick decision on a claim can be made because the case is easy, it's simple. Claims are detained the whole time, and their cases should take 2 weeks from claim to deportation. LGBT cases are the most likely, in my experience, to be subjected to detention or fast track. But let me be clear. LGBT cases are the antithesis of quick. These claims are so complex that a quick decision is impossible. There are so many variables, and I have a couple of examples that I'd like to give you that complicate these cases and kind of extend the time needed in order to resolve these and decide these efficiently and fairly. The examples include the availability of independent country evidence, the time needed for a claimant to obtain their own evidence, the time it takes to accurately statement a person's claim. A good claim should take at least 10 hours to statement. The time it takes for the Medical Foundation or Freedom from Torture or the Helen Bamber Trust to assess and produce reports. The existence of any safe areas in the country complicate the issues too. The individual's mental and emotional state, their level of education, all the different intersectional factors will have bearing on the complexity of a case. Their ability to articulate their experiences in a way that a Western system understands will also have a similar impact. The double whammy that detention and fast track can kill a case. So most of these cases end up with no legal representation because a lot of solicitors do not have legal aid franchises to work on fast track detained cases. Even when they do have solicitors, detention kills communication. It impedes the ability to gather evidence that will support their claims and increasingly the truth about their sexuality. So as Angela's described, detention is like prison. It's punishing people who have come to our country to seek safety. In the LGBT context and in other contexts, detention exacerbates the trauma that LGBT people are forced to go back to. They're forced to go back into the closet to make sure that they're safe. They're forced to go back into hiding so that fellow detainees won't subject them to the treatment that they escaped. And this only worsens their mental well-being. Angela, you've also mentioned the position with the National Asylum Support System, so the system of maintenance and accommodation. The system with accommodation is similar. You're forced to go back into a closet. You're forced to live with people from your own background who you fear will subject you to the treatment that you have fled. Living on £35 a week forces you to make choices between food and hygiene, food and other necessities. In my experience, I've encountered a significant number of LGBT people who've been forced into sex work and prostitution as a result of living on £35 a week and not being able to cope. Especially in a city like London, where the cost of travel alone is more than that. So I want to talk a little bit about the process and quality of decision-making that affects LGBT cases. In 2010, the UK Lesbian and Gay Immigration Group reported that there is a systematic discrimination within the asylum system. And this is based on 98% of LGBT cases being refused. This is compared to a refusal rate of about 73% of all other claims. Though the Home Office decision-making has improved, it still needs a lot of improvement. So one of the examples I'll give you is the issue of discretion. In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled that the UKBA could not hold it reasonably tolerable to expect people to return to their countries of origin and avoid persecution by being discreet. It argued that the expectation of discretion to repress your identity, to hide, to live in constant fear, was in itself persecution. This is supposed to herald a new dawn in the decision-making of LGBT cases, but it doesn't. The concept has now been dressed up and reintroduced in another guise as the question of openness. Caseworkers use questions about how out refugees are in the UK to argue that they would voluntarily choose to go home and live discreetly in the countries of origin, and therefore they don't engage the remit of protection. These are trick questions, but they violate the Refugee Convention because the Convention doesn't mention anything about taking steps to reduce the risk of persecution. There's a lot of stereotyping in LGBT cases, so I'm going to briefly mention a couple that are used to arbitrarily reduce cases. LGBT people apparently would not get married. They would not have children. Forced compelled marriage is a foreign concept. All LGBT people would choose to live openly. All LGBT people read gay magazines. They go to bars and clubs and they read Oscar Wilde. This was used in an actual case. If you live in a religious or religiously conservative country, you would not act on your sexual desire. Gay men are effeminate, lesbians are rich. The UKBA has consistently sexualized the narrative of LGBT people's persecution. So caseworkers and judges routinely forget that the identity and persecution of LGBT people is about so much more than their sexual preferences and who they decide to have sex with. But the focus on sex is unhelpful because it denies the emotional aspects of sexual identity. And it also denies the fact that individuals who have been raised in cultures familiar to us, where sex is a private matter, they will be reluctant to talk. Where you're reluctant to talk is used against you. It is even more unhelpful when claimants have been subjected to sexual violence and are pursued for the gory details. So culture, shame, interviewers' insensitivity all make disclosure difficult. And this conduct, again, re-traumatizes asylum seekers in a system which doesn't understand their reluctance to speak or to lay their lives bare, and will actively deny them protection if they don't. The issue of proving your identity is just one example of the tension that exists for all asylum seekers, but this is particularly acute in the LGBT context. So the system requires that each applicant understand and can articulate their sexual identity clearly in a framework that is familiar to the rest. It doesn't account for the fact that most people have spent their lives repressing their sexualities, denying their sexualities, without the language with which to frame their feelings and their identities. So how can they go seamlessly from not having the language to be able to do so clearly, unequivocally, in a way that they understand? And finally, the last issue that I want to mention is perhaps the most burdensome. It's the one of credibility. So the consistency and credibility of a person's narrative is consistently used to discredit their entire experience. The Home Office consistently uses prejudgments of how LGBT people would behave on the basis of their culture, or society, or their predicament, to doubt that they would be telling the truth overall. On the surface, checking for consistency makes sense, but in reality it is unreliable and an inconsistent measure of a person's narrative, particularly when one looks into how people make judgments or how people act. Human nature is not always rational. Human lives are not carried out consistently. LGBT people make mistakes too, even when hiding their identities. They can easily act in a way that trips them up. But the Home Office says that this is impossible. It's implausible that you would do such a thing. So you're lying about everything, your story, your sexuality, no protection for you. The imprecision of the credibility analysis is highlighted by statistics. So the UKLGIG has estimated that 86% of refusal letters from 2011 were rejected on credibility issues, concluding that these claimants were not LGBT altogether. Of these cases, 32.5% were overturned on the same credibility issues at appeal. There's a lot more to be said, but I'd like to conclude on this point. This has been my attempt to give you a brief overview of my research into the LGBT refugee experience. And what I'd like to do is actually introduce the third speaker, Huyan, who, as we know, is a lawyer from Morocco and a very good friend of mine. She's very nervous about her English, but I think that she should be very confident. She's incredibly articulate, and I ask that you're very forgiving and gentle. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. I'm here today to talk about my experience as a Muslim asylum seeker in this country. I will not talk about my personal details. I will just talk about the common issues that make my story similar to the other stories of most of Muslim asylum seekers in this country. I'm a Moroccan girl. I'm 34 years old. I spent 33 years in my home country. there where I studied at the university and worked in the private sector. I had a comfortable life. I used to live in a society where we speak the same language, we practice the same tradition, and I have lived in a society with which I know the rules and the laws. I came from Morocco, where I used to enjoy every single little thing. As the warm sun all the year, the odor of freshly baked bread, the smell of the tea with men, the voice of the sound of the waves of the Atlantic Sea in the silence of night, and the dew drops in my face early in the morning, and the smell of the dirt when the first drops of the rain fall. This was the society where I used to live. It was a conservative society. They allowed me to go to the university and have a financial independence, but with a condition: to be a copy of stereotype Moroccan girl. I was supposed in that age to be a housewife, taking care of my husband and my children as other women in my family and my society. Whenever I grew up, my desire to express myself as a lesbian girl increased. I couldn't hide it anymore. This is what created a conflict between me, my family, and the whole society. I started to feel that all of them reject me just because I was born with a special feeling that they don't understand. I started to feel discriminated, and the law doesn't protect me. I have tried hard to avoid this feeling, but I didn't succeed. I tried to make end to my life, but I haven't succeeded. I tried to flee from myself, but I didn't succeed. Then I have decided to keep my life and my identity and flee from all that remains. I have decided to flee from my family, my friends, my colleagues, all the society, to flee from the costume that was stronger me, from the law who doesn't protect me. Instead, he accused me and made me guilty. I decided to immigrate. It wasn't an easy decision, especially in my age, and especially that I used to have a comfortable life in my country. The most important thing that encouraged me to do it is my faith, my Islamic religion. My Islamic religion gives me a right to immigrate if I don't feel safe in my home country. Unfortunately, once I'm in UK, I start to lose. I collected all my little things and I came to Great Britain. Great Britain, the symbol of freedom and human rights. I came full of hope and confidence. Hope to have a better life and confidence about my education and my experience, and confidence about the integrity of the law in this country. Unfortunately, once I'm in UK, I started to lose this hope and confidence. I found myself a foreigner in a country where I don't have friends or family. I can't speak the same language, and I don't understand the traditions, and my resources are limited. I started to look for help and advice. In that time, I didn't have the courage to talk about my problems or my sexuality. I knew that the law here protects me, but something inside didn't allow me to talk. I have lived a lot of problems, but I have resisted with a big hope that at the end of the day, I will get my freedom. Unfortunately, now I feel disappointed and deceived because till today, I'm still waiting for this day. So let me tell you what happened in my first interview in the UK Border Agency when I claimed asylum first time. In that day, my appointment was at 8 a.m. I waited for more than 2 hours. My interview with the officer wasn't more than 1 hour. After they took from me all documents that prove my Moroccan identity, my passport, my ID card, and my driving license. I was asked to wait in the waiting room. I waited there till 4 p.m. Then one officer came to talk to me and informed me that they made decision to take me to the detention center till they made decision in my asylum case. In that moment, whole bar of my life passed front of my eyes. I felt dizzy, but I gathered myself as I kept strong. I expected anything after this interview, but not to be detained. So I accepted this decision without any discussion. Then the officer started the strict inspection procedures. She asked me to hand her over my mobile and all what I had in my pockets. She asked me also to give her the little scarf that I wore in my neck. It was my mother's scarf. I wore it that day to not feel lonely. I asked the officer to let me keep it in my pocket, but she refused. I tried many times, but she refused to leave it to me. I took my scarf and I wiped my tears with it and I gave it to her. After she asked me to give her my hand as she can handcuff it. I didn't think twice, I just said no. Even though I was crying, my voice was very clear when I said no. She tried hard to convince me, but I kept saying no. And I said that I wasn't a criminal, and I had accepted all her instructions, but I would never let her handcuff my hands. At the end, she accepted to let my hand free, but I had to hang her hand and her colleague's hand when they took me from the office to the van. Then they took me by van to another place. Till today, I don't know where it was or what kind of offices it was. I waited there till 6 p.m. with other people, men and women from different countries. Then they took me again by another van in a long way to different places to end the journey at 1:30 a.m. in Yarrowswood Detention Center. All that time I was gathering myself to not sleep or pass out. I was afraid to wake up in Morocco. It was very cold and cloudy. I could see just the large iron doors, the tall walls, and the tall trees. I understood that the center was in a forest far from the urban area. They handed me over to the reception and they went. And the new officer started again the strict inspection procedures. I spent 1 hour in the reception office. Then one officer asked me to follow him to my room. We crossed many doors and many passageways till we attained a long corridor with many closed rooms and a dim light. Finally, I ended the day in my room in detention center. I was afraid, weak, tired, thirsty, and hungry. I lived there 22 days. Actually, it was more or longer than 22 years. I recall one day when I was in the detention center, I felt very upset, strongly, and hopeless. I feel that if I stayed by my own anymore, I might harm myself. I was aware of my mental state. I decided to go and find someone to talk. I went downstairs to the mosque, but unfortunately nobody was there. Beside the mosque were the church and the temple. I stood in the middle and I started crying again. The priest came to see me. He asked me if I needed help. I said that I want just to talk to someone. He invited me to his office and I said that I was Muslim. He responded that he didn't ask me about my religion and that we all worship one God. I walked into his office. He gave me a warm tea and he that he was there just to listen to me, not to judge me. I spent nearly 1 hour in his office, and after I asked him if he could find an Arabic Quran for me, he said that what he has is an English version of Quran and an Arabic version of Bible. He gave me both of them. He took one paper and he wrote for me, "Never give up. God loves you." And he promised me that he would pray God to help me. And I thanked him and I went. In my way back to my room, I went to the reception office to ask if there is someone who cared for the Muslim residents. They said that there is one, but he used to come just in special events. I was there for 22 days, but I never seen him. After the dinner that time, in the same day, one girl came to me and asked me if I was the Moroccan woman, and she said that the priest has asked them to make a mass prayer for me in the church. I'm sure that if that day I found someone in the mosque, he would make the same favor to me, but unfortunately I wasn't lucky. 22 days passed, I was waiting for the Home Office decision. Till the last day, they come to inform me that I was released, but with conditions. They give me one document which says that I must reside in the same address where I used to live in London. I must report regularly to an immigration official, and I'm not allowed to take any job. This document was titled, "To a person who is liable to be detained." I tried to be patient and wise to see the full half of the glass, and I said to myself, I was looking for my freedom. Now they give me freedom with conditions. That means I was in the right way. I had just to be patient. Till now, I still live in with the same conditions. I still carry on that document, which reminds me that I may be detained at any time. After I was released, I went to my place in London. I expect to hear from the Home Office in 2 weeks' time. Many weeks passed, and I didn't hear anything from them. I spent all my money, and I couldn't survive by myself anymore. I had some problems in that place where I used to live. And to protect myself, I just left it. And suddenly, I found myself homeless in the street. So I decided to ask the Home Office for my rights as an asylum seeker in this country and have mass support. They accepted, and they gave me an accommodation in a hostel for asylum seeker in Croydon. I resided there 6 weeks. My accommodation was a single bed in a shared room with 3 other women. In this hostel, they provide 3 meals per day without any financial support. So, as an asylum seeker, I was supposed to not need anything except food, not even a bus ticket. Within that 6 weeks, and at least 3 times a week, some people from the church used to come our dining room to offer their support and services and to distribute fruit, bread, and milk for all the residents. I was there for 6 weeks. I have not seen a Muslim or someone from the mosque who did the same. After the hostel, they moved me to another accommodation in Liverpool. It was 1 room in a shared house with 9 other women. In the new accommodation, they don't provide meals. They give a financial support. It's £36 per week. So as an asylum seeker, I'm supposed to manage to buy all things I need. Bus ticket, food, drink, clothes, bathroom stuff, and other things with £36. It's really a big challenge. Once I'm in Liverpool, I asked my housemates if there was any possibility to go English classes to improve my language. One of them offered to me to go with her to her English classes because there was a free transport for that class. The day after, a big van came to pick us up from our door to the class with other asylum seekers from other houses. I found myself in a big room in a church. All people working there were volunteers for the church. They offer food and drink, they teach English, and they provide free transport for asylum seekers. I recall also, a few weeks ago, I traveled, so I spent all £36 in just one day. When I went back to my room, I was hungry and I didn't have anything to eat. I decided to ask an organization for help. They accept and they give me one document. They asked me to go another place to collect food. It was raining and cold. I had to walk a long way. Till I reached that place. Then I found myself again in another church. I got in. I was wet and cold and I was crying. It was a really bad feeling to feel hungry, cold, lonely, and foreign. At the door, the priest came with one lady, came to talk to me. They took my jacket to the heater. They gave me towel to dry my face and my hair. They offered to me soup and toast, tea and cake. They gave me some food to take with me to my room. I had a long chat with them. Then they said that I could stay there as long as I want because the church was warm and I can went there whenever I need. So out of my experience as an asylum seeker in Liverpool, I can confirm that there is no mosque or Muslim organization who support Muslim asylum seeker, while the church gives everything to the asylum seeker as a charity. I talk about this experience because I'm sure that there is a lot of Muslim people who want to help and they are happy to help, but they don't know how. So I give them some examples. As I said, my experience is similar to other Muslim asylum seeker stories, but I feel really grateful and lucky because I have met group Iman. It's a Muslim group. They support me and they give me their time. They make my hard times easier. I want to tell them thank you. So thank you all Iman group members. I hope if all Muslim seekers, asylum seekers can be supported by other Muslim organizations. I want to say that wherever we come from, whatever our reason is to seek asylum in this country, race, religion, sexuality, color, or gender, we all are here looking for safety and freedom. We all need you as a Muslim community, as brother, sister, and as Ansar.
Issue is a real black spot in terms of Muslim thinking, and unfortunately a lot of Muslims approach this, a lot of us approach this from a very kind of academic and theoretical manner, and once we apply and actually see human faces and kind of human stories, it kind of adds another kind of dimension to it. So thank you very much, I really appreciate it. We now move over to Eddie Freeman from the Jewish Council for Racial Equality to discuss in terms of how the Jewish community deals with these kinds of issues.
Right. Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Right. Well, I think I'm really asking you to do a sort of a big shift in your thinking now. We've heard a lot of emotional things about being an asylum seeker, and I want to talk about a community who used to be asylum seekers, refugees. Many of us were also economic migrants. And
I want to talk about how we respond to the challenge of asylum today. And I think it opens up questions about how minority communities contribute to a multicultural society, and that balance between being a minority community and sometimes being a victim of persecution, of prejudice, of discrimination, yet knowing that we need to be a part of the solution, that we can't hide behind our minority experience, but that we have to be upfront and join with other people in Britain to create a better and fairer society for all of us. So what I'd like to do very briefly is talk a little bit about the work of the Jewish Council for Racial Equality and talk about our experiences as Jews. And I think also, I would add, I think many of these experiences would also resonate with you and with other minority communities. And I want to then describe very briefly a proposed Muslim-Jewish asylum project in Tower Hamlets. And finally, I hope this will inspire you to think about a possible Muslim-Jewish asylum project that we could get off the ground. But first, I just want to mention a few things which influence why the Jewish community is involved in anti-racism and some of the problems, and I hope that some of these issues will also resonate with you. So very quickly, the Jewish community in Britain is a very small minority. There are less than 250,000. We always debate in the Jewish community how many there are of us, but 250, 350,000, less than 0.5% of the whole UK population, so quite small. Then there's a debate about whether or not we're an ethnic minority or whether we're a religious group, whether we're both, or whether we're neither. We have very few Black and Asian Jews as co-religionists, so unlike the Christian community, the Muslim community, we don't necessarily relate to each other in terms of Black and white and Asian. We haven't had any missionaries in the Third World. There's a lot of emphasis in the community, as there is in other minority communities, on social welfare, and if people are being not very nice to us, they say we spend too much time looking after our own. If we don't do that, then obviously you're criticized for that as well. The Holocaust, no matter how many years it's been since the end of the Holocaust, still casts a shadow over the entire Jewish community, even someone like me who has not knowingly lost a family member in the Holocaust. The continued persistence of anti-Semitism. There is a perception amongst some Jewish people that there are people within the Black and Asian community who are anti-Semitic. There is a concern that anti-Semitism was yesterday's racism,